We've waited over 7 months for tangible new content in Payday 3, and the entire community's been going stir crazy, with Weekend Plan cancelling memes as this DLC update has been held up like the saviour of heister kind. So what's the verdict now it's finally in our hands? It's alright. I'm not sure it was worth cancelling my wedding for, but well. In all seriousness, I think Boys in Blue has actually been placed in a tricky spot, with almost all of its initial marketing being fan-driven. The fact it has failed to live up to that hype for me shouldn't be the greatest criticism, but my emerging reputation as a permanent negative Nancy has given me a bit of breathing room to be more objective when tackling new content to the game. It's impossible to make a video that brings the dead gamers together alongside the We Are So Back brigade, but to be honest, for the lovers and haters of Payday 3, this update has something for everyone. Clover is astonishingly well done. The DLC weapons are insanely polished and pretty well balanced. Boys in Blue is a compelling heist with excellent narrative build-up, solid design for shootouts, and offers a genuine challenge unlike any other heist in the game. However, at the same time, it's small scale, low stakes, and fundamentally extremely simplistic, both in loud and stealth. It seems as though the team just can't capture the magic set pieces of old Payday with Unreal, which feels crazy to suggest. Overall, it's a solid update, and at its reduced price, I can abide by the DLC much more than I could with Syntax Error back in 2023. But for what's been heralded as a flagship update and turning point for the game, it was always gonna be a bit of a Sisyphean task. I'm hoping to see a lot more from Land of the Free, likely next month, which fortunately this update sets up impeccably. Initial impressions out of the way, let's now delve into the details of the update to discuss what it does so well in some areas, but where it fails in others, starting of course with the heist itself. Boys in Blue is a Vlad contracted daytime hit on a fully staffed police station in Brooklyn. It's expertly introduced by Vlad, who's later joined in the conversation by the returning Clover. The character dynamics and voice acting in the cutscenes surrounding this heist are on another level for me, with this being the first heist I can really think of in Payday 3 that has a very clear and logical context, whilst also linking to the wider story. Vlad's legitimate cash for gold business, which really exists to launder money, has been raided after a crooked cop set him up, with all the gold at his premises being seized as evidence. He wants it back from the evidence room, and the Payday gang are willing to assist, as through his bent cop, Vlad has a lead on Concord, the ex-Murky Water CEO, and mastermind behind the assassination attempts on the crew. Clover's back on board, as she's also working through Dragon and Vlad to avenge her new gang over in Ireland, who were fatally caught in the crossfire when the assassins came for her. It's actually compelling and makes sense. What this heist also does very well from the off is nail the atmosphere, both inside and outside the precinct. The moody surrounding streets, running trains, and dingy station itself are ideal environments for gunfights or tense stealth sections. Starting off with my preferred approach to heisting, going loud, this one is a really mixed bag. It's a relatively small map size, well-treaded setting, and simplistic objectives don't bring much new to the table, but as I've already mentioned, the actual play space and cop spawns are well designed. This leads to it feeling more like a fun playground heist to test builds on than a genuinely compelling co-op experience. To be clear, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, although I still believe it's indicative of Starbreeze avoiding that multi-act heist formula which has worked so well in the past. This one really can be boiled down to find some explosives, attach a winch to the vault door, give the truck extra power, loot the vault, and steal a car for the getaway. 3 of these 5 objectives are in the wait and defend category, so when you peer past the smoke and mirrors, you quickly realise this heist boils down to defending glorified drills with a new lick of paint. Outside of grabbing some car keys from a safe, you can actually complete this entire heist without really leaving the car park, which is a shame because exploring and getting into gunfights in these varied environments is really what Boys in Blue does best. To try and encourage loud players inside on the upper floors, there is an optional hack objective which leads to some really enjoyable combat scenarios, but just like with No Rest for the Wicked's bonus intel, this serves no gameplay purpose within the build we played. I'm told it should have a reward in the future. Regardless, I found myself doing it anyway just to switch up the gameplay, moving from detailed interior corridor sections which favour close quarters builds, to exterior parking lot gunfights out in the open with multiple rooftop spawns that lean into AR and sniper playstyles. It's tightly designed, but as I feared from my initial impressions, the heist just doesn't do anything special outside of placing you in satisfying combat scenarios and telling you to have fun on your own. It's slightly reminiscent of No Mercy, where the fun is front-loaded into the madness of the combat, but the tasks around just staying alive are innately uninspiring. I'm generally a fan of its spawn logic though, and see this as an area of massive improvement since syntax error. The primary loot type being gold is cool and ties well into the narrative, whilst also preventing you from sprinting with it, even with transporter skills, adding another element of difficulty. Speaking of that difficulty, I'm not sure there's a heist in the game as challenging as Boys in Blue when going loud on overkill. It can be brutal. This is partially due to its intense spawn logic, especially around the vault, and the fact that it often encourages you to hold out in one location, allowing the cops to properly swarm you, instead of being run in circles. I also think it has something to do with the timing of the final charge, and how these sit and wait objectives control the pace of the heist, so you can't just speedrun through objectives and escape before things fully ramp up. To me, the added challenge is a selling point, although they make things even harder in this corridor before the evidence room by making it ludicrously reflective, virtually blinding you as you try to peer outside. The game generally has issues with locking out from the interior lighting sections, but this has to be the worst example of the problem in the game, and absolutely needs addressing, especially when it's so close to the heist's primary goal. I should also mention these neat little donut consumables that give you a full set of grip, rush and edge buffs for their normal duration. They're cute and I like them, but their gameplay relevance is slightly limited. Overall, if I had to put a number on it, I'd give Boys in Blue a 6 out of 10 as a loud heist. It's massively held back by its limited ambition, but still contains enough of that arcadey fun synonymous with Payday 2 to be worthy of your attention. Moving on to stealth, once again what it lacks in ambition and novel ideas, it makes up for in polish. It really does remind me of Breakfast in Tijuana in places. Everything is tightly designed from traversal to guard behaviour and pathing, leading to what feels like a well-tailored experience throughout. It can be completed with all loot completely maskless, which is always a fun challenge, leading well into Payday 3's newer stealth mechanics. You can really feel the risk-reward of masking up, and I think the choice to limit the number of secure areas on the map is to its benefit, allowing us to move more fluently throughout. It is a little ironic that the literal pig pen has less intense security protocols than a nightclub, but I suppose that says more about public services in the Payday universe than anything else. Not dissimilar from its loud counterpart, it's also very simple objective-wise. I enjoyed stealthing around the upper floor of the office, but waiting for various PC hacks and finding some fingerprints doesn't do a whole lot to engage you. The donut distraction is a lot of fun though, and things get better once downstairs, as you have to locate a keycard by following instructions from the hacked PC and make your way into the evidence room. There's an interesting gimmick to this, where any wait beyond the single heister will lock the gate to prevent anyone from moving the loot bag through, which can throw a spanner into the works in co-op, but generally just forces you to throw the gold through this panel and walk it out the other way. Dragging it over to the escape can be a bit of a pain, but it's a nice change of pace to be forced out in the open for a while after how claustrophobic the rest of the heist is. Sadly, RNG is still heavily limited, with room and objective spawns being the primary things to switch around, with the overall objective formula always being roughly the same. They still haven't worked out a robust system of randomness for heists, which will continue to limit their replayability. Interestingly, just like in Loud, stealth has a tricky side objective for Vlad which encourages more exploration of the heist, but goes similarly unrewarded at the moment. These need to be better implemented because they are an interesting challenge, with this one seeing you place 3 listening devices across 3 locations to spy on the movements of the station's lieutenant. When I step back, at times, it almost feels like a test map for showcasing what stealth in Payday 3 does best, but also doesn't really bring any new ideas to the table. It also has the reverse problem of Loud, where the heist is almost entirely played in the station. Given its limited scope and relatively concentrated objectives, this heist is also sadly quite easy and brief once you get the gist of what you're doing, as it mostly just boils down to going from arrow to arrow and doing what you're told. There's not much room for creativity or sleuthing around, sadly. Even so, it is quite engaging and satisfying to clear mask off, so it should be fun for at least the first few runs. For me, stealth is marginally better than Loud, so I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. It's also worth mentioning that this heist has comparatively solid hybrid stealth viability, as you can grab a few key items during stealth for use expressly in Loud, taking some pressure off when the spawns go a little crazy inside the offices. It's pretty satisfying to slip around the private areas even without stealth skills and see how far you can push it, which is another bonus for this heist. But even bigger than that, its music track is a world beater. It's got a certain vibe to it that just nails the setting, and has to be as close to a 10 out of 10 we've seen from Gustavo since Payday 3 came out. In terms of reward, it's not brilliant, with low cash payouts and solid but not amazing XP per minute, although that should be better once the additional objectives are working as intended. What I was impressed by though are the story beats that come with this one. Massive spoilers ahead for those who don't want to hear it, just skip forward about 30 seconds, but I'm sure every news channel will be shouting this from the rooftops once it goes live. The upshot of Vlad's intel is that Concord's holding a prisoner, the one and only Franklin Steele, better known as Houston. So, it looks like Land of the Free will be the Houston breakout that's been teased since before launch, and we can expect him to be the 8th heister in the gang. Again, this reveal is pretty spicy, with those brief post-heist cutscenes finally feeling like they're worth sitting through. That's the core of what Boys in Blue is all about, although the weapon DLC tends to be where I place most of my focus when considering the value of a bundle. Let's start by taking a look at the SMG, the MP5 or 80K7 as it's known in the game. This thing has got a great feel to how it handles. Its solid fire rate is paired with best-in-class recoil handling stats, making it easy to dish out a fair chunk of damage per second across most ranges. Its clear strength is in stability and accuracy, which just makes any weapon function better, meaning you'll probably get a kick out of using it, even if it can't pack the same punch as other SMG options in this slot. I get the feeling this could have been top tier prior to the cutting shot nerf, but even as it stands, the MP5 is a strong enough SMG with very solid close quarters damage and good enough control over range to pick targets off from distance. I love the sound and feel of it, but in practice, what it excels at is already done better by skills that are readily available in the game, so it's nothing numerically special, meaning that's a 6 out of 10 from me, despite still enjoying using it. Up next, we have the Adlerlig RG5 or G3, which is a new assault rifle with quite similar problems to the MP5. It feels entirely solid and capable, but not unique whatsoever, summing up my main gripe with this weapon pack in general. These guns are all quality, with excellent polish, but they don't bring much new to the game, are fundamentally bog-standard weapons, and almost feel like side grades in places. It has decent stopping power, somewhat akin to the AK, and does boast a combination of excellent control and a manageable fire rate, so it's no surprise the two are statistically similar, with the G3 holding 5 more shots in a mag as standard in exchange for slightly weaker overall stats. Worth looking into if you enjoy solid jack-of-all-trades assault rifles, but not a must-purchase with such an excellent alternative readily available. The Bullkick 500, a magnum that's essentially a hand cannon, is the first secondary slot DLC weapon in the game, and this one was worth the wait. It's powerful, fun, and unique, really the antithesis of the other safe weapons added to this DLC. Whilst it doesn't have half the SA's fire rate, it packs a similar punch even without precision shot, smashing through shields and their faceplates in a single shot. It kicks like a mule visually, in exchange for all that power, but doesn't feel that difficult to consecutively aim, especially with the 2x scope. It's not as consistent as other secondary options against standard enemy types, but it fits a utility on certain builds and is a fair standalone weapon if you plan to set up around it. Not needing to land consistent headshots is more of a boon than I first anticipated, giving it a real panic button niche for when in a pinch, dealing enough damage even without edge or supporting skills to land one-shots. With perfect play, you'll get more out of the Bison, but none of us are perfect, so I say embrace the body shot, if just for how satisfying this thing is to shoot. Sadly, it's not the Doze Destroyer I thought it would be, although all accounted for, it's still a top 8 out of 10. Overall, I think the Revolver does a lot of the heavy lifting within this weapon pack, unless you have a particular affinity for the other classic weapons coming across from other games. They don't do enough to differentiate themselves in my opinion, although the animation team has done everything in their power to make all 3 weapons shine, with top tier inspect animations and reloads that go above and beyond what we've gotten used to within the franchise. Once again, I don't doubt the quality, I just don't think I understand the decision-making process that led to side grades already being added to the game when we're missing so many iconic weapon variations from the previous title. I personally think they've designed themselves into a corner with the overkill weapon system and hope they find a way to add more ambitious weapon types in the primary and secondary slot soon enough. Now, amusingly, after saying all of that, the best weapon added in this update doesn't cost a dime, which doesn't do much for the weapon pack's value proposition. The new LMG, the Bleisbrüter MX63, is a first-in-class powerhouse of a weapon that isn't overly damaging, but makes up for it with an excellent fire rate, ammo pickup, and mag size. These 3 stats combine to essentially break the weapon when paired with ammo funnel and replenish. You don't need to worry about cumbersome reload speeds when you can fire effectively forever. As long as you're killing, you won't need to stop. I don't like that it makes using combat reload a bit difficult, as that's my favourite way of sustaining edge and grit, with as little micromanagement as possible, so it doesn't fit into my preferred playstyle, but I've got to admit, it's still fun as hell. Taking a step back to talk performance, its DPS is solid and seems to do especially well against armour, but can't land one-shot kills. Of course, being an LMG, it comes with a fair bit of kick and muzzle flash, so probably not for the precision shooters out there, although few things mow through hordes of standard cops quite like it. I'd give it a 9 out of 10 in hipfire or ADS builds, with the potential to become the strongest weapon in the game if the SA or precision shot gets nerfed. I think people will love it, even if it can be a little cumbersome at times. Onto another free addition that might not directly impact the gameplay, but it sure as hell makes the Payday franchise what it is. That's of course the return of Clover. Her design hasn't changed much from game to game, with an almost identical mask, although she's finally tying that purple streaked hair up these days to avoid it clipping all over the place. The all black with the 3/4 length coat has a funeral vibe about it, which is fitting as she's joining up with the gang hot off the heels of losing the crew she was leading back home in Ireland, which has left her jaded and hungry for revenge. She's the first character to give the conflict with Concord a bit of personality, and she brings that same energy into most of her voice lines. Honestly, regardless of any heist or tribalism, Aoife Duffin's performance in Payday 3 is up there with the best from Payday 2, even my boy Jimmy, who really is the gold standard for me. She's witty and authoritative, with some brilliantly written lines.
Hey, Hoxton!
And also brings a lot of emotion and intrigue to her involvement in story cutscenes. She also feels much more complete than the other heisters did, especially at launch, although I'm still holding out hope with Starbreeze obviously calling in the other voice actors to record context-specific lines, we'll finally get a few more realistic crew interactions soon enough. Of course, she's arrived in New York alongside the evolution of her signature weapon, the Queen's Wrath, carrying a Car 4 variant known as the Queen's Revenge, which certainly looks the part but is a bit clunky with its preset attachments. I suppose this is the difference between paid DLC character packs and free character additions, but I know which one I'd still vote for in the future. I also need to run you through the new cosmetics coming in this update, which is split into free and DLC unlocks. I won't be scoring any of these, bearing in mind taste is subjective, but overall I do think the outfits and masks are top quality, it's just a question of whether they appeal to your personal preferences. The masks are Killer K9, Mad Mask, Raider, Clown Punch and Clowninator. I think we're a bit spoiled for choice at the moment when it comes to great masks coming to the game via the Mask of the Week system, although these raw masks are quite nice and are fully customizable, as again Starbreeze have learned from their mistakes in syntax error. The outfits, which each come with a matching pair of gloves, are Flight Risk, Jailbird, Riot Con and Supermax, with me having a surprise fondness for the police attire. I like the overall theme, but do think these could benefit from having colour palette swaps as they did in Payday 2. Oh, and the weapon pack also comes with the Bullion Bar and Cop Nut sticker, which might be worth the purchase just for its description. Moving on to the free masks, we have the Hooded Haunt, Vicious Warrior and Old Bob, as well as the new Pig mask once those drops are active. There are also 2 new mask patterns, 2 stickers and a weapon charm that can also be obtained by watching any Payday 3 streams on Twitch. These are pretty much all DLC quality and are a welcome addition to the game. Finally, we also receive a new Shamrock charm to celebrate Clover's edition, alongside 12 major national flags that will assumedly be added to over time. And as seems to be the case in every new update at this point, new animations have also been added not only to cover unique interactions on Boys in Blue, but also for actions like setting up Thermite on SCB. Eventually, we'll have first-person animations for almost all interactions at this rate, which is a massive step forward from what the game launched with. Just further evidence that a 2024 release might have changed how Payday 3 is now perceived. It's also worth mentioning that the Solo Mode Beta and Special Edition Compensation cosmetics should be included in this update, but weren't available for testing on the partner builds. I shared my thoughts on this first iteration of Offline in the last video I made, where the TLDR is that I think this is a solid step that displays a genuine attempt to make the game playable offline, but it's baby steps compared to what the community expects from a finalized version. When all's said and done, in a different context, I'd probably be singing this update's praises, but after a 7-month content drought, it's important we use Boys in Blue as a solid stepping stone to greener pastures, and don't hold it up like the next coming of Christ. We should expect more from Starbreeze. They've started to prove they're capable of that, so I'm hoping the likes of the Land of the Free and Fear and Greed step things up to the next level, and finally begin to innovate and match the scope of the previous game, to start to repair Payday 3's shoddy reputation. Regardless, you're probably wondering if this is a DLC you should pick up, or if it's just worth trying out the game again after all the recent quality of life improvements. My no-frills answer is no to the former, yes to the latter. Payday 3 as an overall experience has improved quite drastically since December, but in my honest opinion, Boys in Blue is not a better DLC than Syntax Error, so unless you're a Gold or Silver Edition owner, your best bet is to try and hop in with friends or just grab the weapon pack separately, as that's where most of the DLC value is front-loaded. Boys in Blue is still a fine update. It's not an all-timer, and there are plenty of lessons to learn from its failings, but at the very least it's worth checking out, especially if you already own the game. And genuinely, as sad as it might seem, that's the most positive outlook I've had on Payday 3 for over 9 months, so yeah, that's the sound of the Grinch's heart growing 3 sizes. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to join the stream this evening to unlock your Twitch drops and maybe learn something new about yourself. I'll hopefully see you all there. A huge thank you to my dedicated Patreon backers. If you want to join this crew in going infamous, check out the link below and pledge as little as $2 to see your name in the credits, or get 24-hour early access to future videos and vote on upcoming content. Take care, I'll see you all soon.